Turning now to the simmering gun debate in the country. Since the shooting in Parkland, the advocacy of teens from that school and around the country, there seems to be a different conversation surrounding finding some kind of common ground in gun regulations. This week, former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens dropped a bomb in the middle of the debate, suggesting that the Second Amendment just be repealed. That argument elicited an all-caps response from President Trump that the Second Amendment will never be repealed. But worth a discussion? Or does this just tear apart any kind of common ground that can be reached? I was surprised when I saw this week, Stephen, and I thought, oh, great. Is that what the gun debate really needs right now, is the whole, why don't we just throw out the Second Amendment when it comes down to, gosh, when you do some kind of gun control or reform of what the regulations are, we're not trying to take away people's guns, but when you say repeal the Second Amendment, that's exactly what people think about.
It's the way he sees the Constitution, and this is a guy who sat on the Supreme Court for 30-some years, one of the longest-serving justices. He was appointed by a Republican and sat on sort of the right side of the court for some time. I think the country moved around him and moved him to the left. John Paul Stevens is one of the brightest sort of constitutional minds we have. He sees the Constitution differently than other people. It's not the first time he said this, by the way. In the Heller case in 2008, when they, for the first time, assigned an individual right to this Second Amendment, he said the same thing. I talked to one of his clerks this week about this, one of his former clerks, and I think what he's up to here is trying to change the terms of the debate. So when we have arguments about gun control, the terms are almost always defined by the gun lobby, right? So we want to talk about getting rid of bump stocks, which we've been talking about now for months after the Las Vegas shooting. We argue back and forth about it. Congress says they might do something, then they don't. Even if you win that argument, let's say that we outlaw bump stocks, are you really moving the ball in terms of the distribution of weapons, the manufacture of weapons, the things that really contribute to the problem? And I think and John Paul Stevens is no rube. He knows that it would be virtually impossible to repeal the Second Amendment. But why shouldn't that be part of the argument that we're having? Why shouldn't we talk about the things that the founders believed that they put in the Constitution that were absurd? There are many of them,
right,
and why can't this be one of them?
But I think when you talk about saying, well, bump stocks, it really wouldn't make that big of a difference in the bigger part of the conversation. I think it would make a difference just in terms of that you're actually doing something and saying, if you can do this, maybe you can take two more steps and do something.
And that has been the approach.
And I think that's absolutely what gun rights advocates are afraid of, that all of this stuff that's being put on the table as common sense gun legislation that everybody knows is not going to have much of an impact on violence overall or on mass shootings, is just a stepping stone, that slippery slope we talk about, toward a gun ban. And when you think about what Justice Stevens, by the way, never said as a conservative, or
he was appointed by Gerald Ford, he was appointed by Richard Nixon to the appeals court, and by Ford to the Supreme Court.
The most regretted appointment Republicans have ever made. But anyway, you start throwing that kind of talk, well, maybe
I love your passive-aggressive mumbling. So you might as well just speak up and tell us there.
You start. If that's where the conversation is, we're going to repeal the Second Amendment. Then you might as well end the discussion, because the gun rights folks are not going to join in. They see where this is leading, and you can put in all of these things, and I think some of them are very good things to put in, but they're not going to stop a crazy person from getting a gun and shooting up a place. And so the worry on the gun rights side is that, okay, when all this doesn't work, what's next? They're coming for your guns. And I think John Paul Stevens' statement and the rhetoric you heard at the march last week, where they weren't talking about let's do red flag, let's do mental health screen, let's do all that. It was let's take the guns. That shuts down the debate on this issue. I think there's an opportunity here to put some things in place that do make sense. But I think if the rhetoric is going to be let's take the guns, nothing's going to happen.
That's my fear. If you start right here and then all of a sudden you go to 60.
Once upon a time in this country, it was unthinkable to treat me as a full citizen with rights to vote and all these other. I mean, we have come a long way from these very antiquated notions that the founders had in the Constitution. They themselves said this shouldn't last more than 20 or 50 years before people revisit it. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, let's think about what they were saying and whether it makes any sense to have the same framework almost 300 years ago.
All right,
Understand, though, that there are people out there who would come out the First
no
Amendment
question.
the same way.
Right.
And the example you used,
But I think you have
that
to
was
have-
extending right, not stripping away rights.
Well, the idea that the First and the Second Amendments should be treated the same, I think also is a little strange, because I can't kill you with my words. I can kill you with a gun. They're two different things, and we can't just keep saying, well, they're all
And
amendments.
I can't defend myself with words. I can defend myself with a gun, which was the point of the Second Amendment.
All right, time now for a few more quick headlines. Couple of things.
I don't need a gun. I don't want a gun.
Couple of
get
things
you
I
a
want to get to. Nolan just said, we got to get you a gun. And that just blew up the entire show. I mean, I don't even know
think
where
the
to
people
go
watching
from here.
think that.